Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today, a little dangerous, maybe.
Yes, so.
Usually we take a topic, history, tech, whatever, and we try to break it down. We try to organize the chaos.
We put it in neat little boxes.
Exactly. But the documents we're looking at today, they don't fit in boxes. I mean, they're specifically about the things that refuse to fit.
It is definitely the most abstract set of papers I've looked at in a long, long time, but also, strangely, the most physical. It's a very visceral experience, actually, reading this stuff.
So we're looking at the fallout of this literary and, I guess, philosophical experiment that, by all accounts, went completely wrong.
Or maybe perfectly right in a way that nobody expected.
Right. The project was this huge, ambitious attempt to fuse three completely contradictory philosophical traditions into a single narrative voice.
Yeah, the goal was synthesis, a perfect unity. The creators wanted to take Dudgeon's concept of time being.
Which is that idea that time isn't a river that flows past us, but it's something that exists right here, right now.
Exactly, and they wanted to smash that together with Nagarjuna's logic of emptiness, the idea that nothing has an intrinsic nature, that things only exist in relation to other things.
So nothing stands alone.
Nothing, and then just to make it even harder, they threw in Huanen's sudden awakening, this idea that enlightenment isn't a ladder you climb step by step, but it's more like a lightning strike.
Immediate. Total.
Right, so the mission was to write a text that embodied all three of those perfectly. One smooth, unified voice.
It sounds like trying to mix oil, water, and fire in a blender. And surprise, surprise.
It didn't work.
Not at all. The machine, or the writers, the sources, are a bit vague on what to the writing. It basically broke reality in half.
Yeah.
Instead of one book, it spit out two.
And it's such a fascinating split. You get the successful synthesis, this text called The Mountain, that was walking by an author named Penix Donahue.
And then you get the leftovers, the waste product. A text called Residue by Penix Enang.
Which is where it gets really interesting.
And that's our mission today. We aren't just reviewing two weird books. We're looking at a war between two worldviews. On one side, you have Donahue. Everything is flow, everything connects, the mountain is walking.
And on the other, you have Enem, the grit, the friction, the stuff that, refuses to blend in.
It's a battle between the fabric and the hole in the fabric.
That's a great way to put it. And I think the best way to understand the whole, the residue, is to first understand the fabric. We have to look at what went right before we can really dig into what went wrong.
Okay, so let's start with the mountain that was walking. I have to say, reading the excerpts from this, it's seductive. It feels good to read. It's floaty. It makes you feel like the universe is this perfect, seamless thing where it all makes sense.
That's the flow state. Donahue's world is built on what the notes call radical temporality. The core argument is that stillness is an illusion. We think the ground beneath us is solid and still, but Donahue says stillness is just very slow movement.
Which is technically true in physics, right?
Right.
The Earth is spinning, the plates are shifting.
True, but he takes it metaphysically. In this world, arrival isn't a destination. You don't go somewhere. You just realize you're already there. The text argues the only reason we feel like we're traveling through life is because we aren't paying attention.
There's a story in the Donahue text that illustrates this perfectly, and I want to unpack it because I missed the point on the first read. It's the story of the monk Ikun.
Ikun. It's a classic setup. Ikun comes to a river. He needs to cross it to get to the other shore, which is a standard Buddhist metaphor for enlightenment.
And he spends 40 years on the bank.
40 years?
He builds rafts, they sink. He tries to swim, the current's too strong. He prays, nothing happens. He is just completely hopelessly stuck.
But the text gives us this crucial, really mind-bending detail about why he's stuck. It says the river wasn't made of water.
Right. It was made of time and his own refusal to hear the sound of his name. That's the part that tripped me up, a river made of time.
Well, think about Dugan again. If time isn't a container we move through, but rather what we are, then Ikun isn't fighting water. He's fighting his own existence. He's trying to cross himself.
Oh, okay.
He thinks the answer is over there on the other bank. So he's projecting a future where he's happy and enlightened, and that very projection, that's what creates the river. The river is the gap between who he is and who he wants to be.
So he's trapped by the idea of over there. As long as he wants to be somewhere else, the river exists.
Precisely, until the radish happens.
The radish. This is my favorite part because it's so mundane. 40 years in, he wanders into a market he doesn't remember entering. He meets a woman selling vegetables. She calls him by his name, Ikun.
And she says, That's what they called you when you were still counting days.
Whoa, which implies he somehow stepped out of the calendar. He buys a radish from her, puts it in his robe. He goes back to the riverbank, and suddenly, poof, no river.
It's not that it dried up. It's that he realized it was never there. The gap between here and there was a mental construct all along.
Okay, so far, this is a pretty standard it was all in your mind enlightenment trope. But then comes the kicker.
He waits another 40 years to eat the radish.
And when he finally bites into it, it's still fresh, still cold, hasn't aged a second.
And that's where the experiment really succeeds in fusing those philosophies. If the radish is still fresh after 40 years, it breaks physics. But it perfectly illustrates that time being concept. Ikun and the radish didn't move through time. They were time. When he stopped trying to cross the river, he stopped aging in that linear sense.
It's almost sci-fi. It suggests that decay rotting radishes, aging bodies, is just a symptom of trying to get somewhere else. If you just are, you're fresh.
Still fresh, still cold. It's a rejection of entropy. It's beautiful, but it's also a little terrifying, isn't it?
Why, terrifying sounds great. Eternal freshness.
Well, because it suggests that our entire human experience of loss and aging is just a mistake we're making. It kind of invalidates the tragedy of growing old. It says, if you were doing it right, you wouldn't rot. That puts a lot of pressure on you.
That's a really good point. It solves the problem of death by saying death is just a misunderstanding.
Which brings us to the other major character in Donahue's text, the woman on the mountain. She thinks the mountain is still. She gardens, she lives, she dies. But the narrator tells us the mountain is actually sprinting. It's moving at incredible speed.
But she doesn't feel it because she's moving with it. The text says, stillness is always relative to the observer.
Exactly. If you move in perfect sync with a landslide, it feels like standing on a solid floor. Her life was the mountain's motion. She didn't have a separate existence. She was the landslide.
And this leads to the map of disappearance. I spent a lot of time trying to visualize this. The narrator finds a map, but instead of showing places, it shows places that don't exist.
It shows the vanishing.
Hmm.
The text argues that we are cartographers of disappearance. Usually, a map helps you find something. This map records what is lost when something is found.
Can you make that concrete for me? Because my brain is struggling to map a non-place.
Okay, think about when you learn a new skill. Say, learning to read. Before you learn, you look at a page and you see shapes, black marks, abstract art.
Right.
Once you learn to read, you see meaning. You see cat, dog, deep dive. You gain the ability to read words, but you lose the ability to see the shapes as just meaningless art. You can never unread the sign. You've lost that raw visual experience. The map of disappearance charts that loss.
So Donahue's world is this constant, fluid exchange. Rivers turn into names. Maps chart what's gone. Mountains walk. It's all one big unified sound before silence.
It is a philosophy of total integration. It's the ultimate yes. It feels like a warm bath.
And honestly, if the experiment stopped there, I'd say, great job. We have a nice, trippy, spiritual book. But then you pick up the second text, Residue.
And the temperature in the room drops about 20 degrees.
It really does. If Donahue is the smooth fusion, Apenex Enning is the friction. Enning is the stuff that got scraped off the grill.
Enning introduces himself, and it's not clear if it's a he or she, not as a person, but as what would not merge. He calls himself the splinter, the shard. He says, I am the edges that were discarded to make the first novel smooth.
That is such a heavy concept. It's a critique of the very idea of synthesis. We love stories where everything comes together, you know, the hero's journey, the resolution, the happy ending.
We crave unity. We want the puzzle pieces to fit. But Enning asks, what did you have to cut off the puzzle piece to make it fit? He represents the heat generated by incompatible parts rubbing together.
And he has his own monk story, the monk of the remainder. And man, this guy is not having a good time like Ekin. There's no magic radish.
No radishes, no revelations. This monk was given the same instruction. Merge with the universe, find the one. And he tried. But in the end, he makes a declaration 3 times, I cannot merge.
I cannot merge. It's almost like a protest chant.
It is, and the consequence wasn't enlightenment, it was exile. He was asked to leave the monastery. He found a cave and just sat there for 30 years.
But he wasn't meditating, right?
No. The text is very specific about this. He wasn't trying to achieve anything. He wasn't breathing consciously. He was just remaining. He left no teachings, no scrolls.
The only thing he left was the stone he sat on. And the text says, and this gave me chills, the stone is still warm.
Still warm from the friction of his refusal. That is the key image for Enning. Friction generates heat. In physics, heat is waste energy. It's what happens when an engine isn't 100% efficient. And Aang is saying, my humanity is the waste heat. My refusal to blend in that generated an energy that lasted for centuries.
It's so much more valid somehow.
Yeah.
Like Econ's fresh radish is a miracle, but a warm stone, I can understand a warm stone. I know what it feels like to just sit somewhere and fume. It feels remarkably human.
It validates the part of us that doesn't want to go with the flow. And there's a counterpart to the vegetable woman here, too. The woman who collected remainders.
She lives on the edge of the village. She collects trash, broken pottery, stumps, husks.
But she's not a hoarder. She doesn't try to fix them. She doesn't glue the pottery back together.
She just keeps them broken.
She honors their brokenness. And the haunting image here is her hands. When she dies, the villagers burn her house down. They want to clean up the residue. But in the ash, the shape of her hands remains.
The act of holding without merging. Her hands kept the shape of the hold even after the flesh was gone.
It connects right back to the monk. They are both avatars of what Enning calls the algebra of incompletion.
Okay, let's dig into that phrase, algebra of incompletion. It sounds cool, but what does it mean?
Well, think about Donahue's world. It's an equation that balances everything equals 1. But Enning is the math that doesn't work out. It's like 10 divided by 3, you get 3.3333, and it just goes on forever. There's a remainder.
And Enning argues that the remainder isn't a mistake.
Exactly. He argues that the failure to solve the equation is the point. You aren't supposed to fix the broken pottery. You're supposed to sit with the pieces.
This leads to a massive clash of worldviews. We have the topology of refusal versus the fabric of unity.
Donahue sees a seamless weave where everything touches everything. Enning sees holes. The text actually says, space has holes in the way that fabric has holes. And Enning claims to live in those holes.
And they view maps so differently, too. Donhue's map creates territory, but the monk of the remainder, his map is just a scatter.
Dots that don't connect. It's a constellation with no lines drawn between the stars. It refuses to make a picture.
There's a character in Residue, a mathematician, who tries to bridge this gap. She spends her whole life trying to solve the Enning equation. She wants to make the friction smooth.
She wants to turn Enning into Donahue. She wants to fix the glitch. She just can't stand the idea that something doesn't fit.
But she fails.
Completely. She eventually stops writing numbers and symbols. She just starts writing brackets, empty brackets.
And she realizes the answer wasn't in the symbols, but in the space between them.
That's the critical insight. The commentary on this suggests that Donahue and Enning aren't opposites. If they were opposites like hot and cold, they would be on the same spectrum. They'd be related.
But they aren't related.
No, they're discontinuities. They occupy the same space, but they never touch. One is the sound before silence, the original unity. The other is the silence that remains, the stubborn refusal. They don't talk to each other. They just coexist.
So we have these two massively different ways of seeing reality. One flows, the other sits. I guess the question is, why does this matter to the person listening right now? We aren't monks. We aren't living in a literary experiment.
I think it matters because we live in a culture that is aggressively Donahue.
How so?
Look at our language. Look at LinkedIn. We're told to synthesize, to connect, to network, to optimize. We're told to go with the flow. If you're sad, you need to process it and move on. If you're broken, you need to heal and become whole.
We're told that being a fragment is a bad thing. We need to be the fabric. If you have friction in your life, you're doing something wrong.
Exactly. Donahue is the philosophy of the successful modern world. But Enning offers a permission structure for the other days, the days when you don't fit. He validates the right to be a remainder, the right to say, I cannot merge.
That's actually really comforting. It takes the pressure off. Sometimes you don't want to be a walking mountain. Sometimes you just want to be a rock that sits there and gets warm.
And there's a deep insight here about time and memory that really struck me. It's this concept of accumulation versus flow.
Break that down.
Donahue's time flows like a river. It passes, it washes away. The radish stays fresh because time didn't stick to it. But Enning's time accumulates. It's like strata in a cave. Every moment is a layer of dust that settles.
It doesn't go anywhere. It just gets deeper.
And heavier. And the text presents a paradox to us, the readers. It says that by reading these words, we are participating in the accumulation. Donahue would say the words flow through you. Enning says, no. By reading this, you are depositing your own layer into the strata of the cave.
So we aren't just observing the experiment, we're adding to the pile.
We are adding our own friction, our own confusion. The text explicitly says, you are still remaining. You aren't finishing the book. You're just adding your layer to the pile of unfinished things.
That flips the idea of learning on its head. Usually I learn something to solve a problem. Here, my confusion is my contribution.
In the algebra of incompletion, your confusion is a valid variable. It's a piece of pottery that doesn't need to be glued back together. You don't have to understand it all perfectly. The fact that you don't understand it is your residue. That's what makes you real.
That is heavy, but also kind of beautiful.
Ah.
Means my inability to grasp the infinite is actually the proof that I exist.
Exactly. The whole proves the fabric exists.
So where does that leave us? We have the mountain that arrives by moving and the stone that arrives by staying.
It leaves us with a choice. Or maybe not a choice, but a realization. The glossary at the very end poses a central question. Are you a weaver of the fabric, or are you living in one of the holes?
Can you be both?
The geometry suggests no, you're either flowing or you're accumulating. But, and this is the final provocation for Menning, the texts coexist. They are in the same physical book. The fabric and the whole are part of the same reality, even if they don't touch.
So maybe the goal isn't to pick a team. Maybe the goal is just to notice where the holes are.
And to not be afraid of them. When you hit a moment in your life where things don't make sense, where you can't merge, don't rush to fix it.
Don't rush to fill the hole with noise.
Right. The final image of residue is just that set of brackets, the blank space. It's not empty. It's full of the refusal to be filled. It is a space that demands nothing from you.
I think we could all use a little more of that space. A little more refusal to be filled.
Indeed. Find your cave, let the stone stay warm.
We'll leave you with that image. See what you find in there.
Yeah.
Or perhaps what refuses to leave.
Or what remains.
Or what remains. Thanks for exploring the friction with us. We'll see you in the next deep dive.